Sir, I'm scared. Mom won't wake up. She was 4 years old, barefoot in the snow, standing at the door of the most dangerous man in Chicago, and she didn't even know it. He opened the door expecting nothing. He found a child so small she couldn't reach his doorbell. Eyes full of tears she refused to let fall, wearing boots that didn't match and a coat that swallowed her whole. She looked straight up at him, no flinching, no running, and said the 7 words that cracked 12 years of iron wide open. The most feared man in the city took a slow breath, crouched down and said, "Take me to her." If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and follow along until the very end, because this one is going to stay with you. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The doorbell at 14 Harrington Court had not rung in 11 days. Milo Keating preferred it that way. His men knew better than to knock unless something was on fire, and even then, they'd better be certain it wasn't something he'd set himself. He had 3 phones on the kitchen island, all of them silent by choice. He had a glass of scotch he hadn't touched. He had a headache behind his left eye that had been living there since Tuesday. And he had, for the first time in 6 months, something that almost resembled a quiet evening. He was standing at the window when he heard it. Not the doorbell, not a knock from one of his men, something smaller, something that didn't sound like it belonged to his world at all. Thump, thump, thump. Small, insistent, almost desperate. He turned slowly. He didn't move right away. In his line of work, you didn't move towards sounds without thinking first. He waited, listened, and then thump, thump, thump again. He crossed the room in 7 steps, and when he opened the door, the cold hit him first. That brutal Chicago January cold that didn't ask permission before it walked right into your lungs. And then he looked down. She was so small. He almost didn't see her. She barely came up to his waist. She was wearing a coat that was 3 sizes too big, dark green, the kind you'd find at the bottom of a church donation box. And on her feet were a pair of boots that didn't match. One had a Velcro strap. One had a lace that had been tied wrong, looped twice around the ankle instead of the top. Her hair was tangled and loose around her face, and her cheeks were red from cold. But her eyes were enormous. Dark brown, rimmed with tears that hadn't fallen yet, like she was holding them back by sheer will alone. Like she'd decided that crying wasn't going to help, so she wouldn't do it. Not yet. She looked up at him and she didn't flinch. That was the first thing that caught him off guard. Every adult who had ever stood at his door had flinched, without exception. It was the first thing his face communicated. Danger, step back, reconsider. He'd been told once, by a man who no longer worked for him, that standing in front of Milo Keating was like staring into the face of a weather system that had already decided it was going to level your house. He hadn't disagreed, but this child looked at him like he was just a man, like he was just a tall man who happened to open a door, and right now, in her world, tall men who opened doors were simply people who could help. "Sir," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was steady. "I'm scared." Milo said nothing. "Mom won't wake up." The silence between them stretched for 2 full seconds. Maybe 3. He had heard a lot of things in his life. He had heard men beg. He had heard negotiations go sideways and deals collapse. And the specific sound a room makes when everyone in it realizes that the power has just shifted. He had heard things that were supposed to move mountains. This was 7 words from a child who couldn't reach his doorbell, and somehow they hit harder than any of it. "How long?" he asked. His voice came out lower than he intended. She blinked. "Since this morning. She made me breakfast and then she laid down and she said she was tired, and then she didn't wake up, and I tried and tried, and I shook her, and I talked to her, and I even sang her song, but she didn't." Her chin trembled, just once. Then she locked it back into place. She didn't wake up. Milo looked past her. The street was empty. Nobody else was out here. No parent standing at a safe distance. No neighbor watching from a doorway. Just the snow falling in loose, indifferent sheets, and this little girl standing alone on his steps, like she'd navigated herself here by some instinct he couldn't name. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Crane Street," she said. "The yellow building. Apartment 4C. It's not very far. I walked." He looked at her feet again, the mismatched boots, the lace looped wrong. She had walked through the snow, alone, he glanced at the clock on the wall just inside the door, 6:47 in the evening, to knock on a stranger's door because her mother wouldn't wake up. Something happened in his chest right then. He didn't have a clean word for it. It wasn't pity exactly. It was something older than that, something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. He stepped back inside, picked up his coat from the hook by the door, a heavy black wool coat that cost more than most people's rent, and crouched down. Not because he'd planned to, just because he didn't want to be tall anymore right now. He wanted to be at her level. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily." "Lily," he said at once, like he was checking that it was the right name for this person. It was. "I'm Milo. I'm going to come with you, okay?" She studied him for a second. Children were honest like that. They looked at you without the layer of social performance that adults wrapped around everything. She was reading him the way kids read adults, with something close to animal accuracy. Then she nodded. "Okay." He draped his coat around her shoulders. It swallowed her completely. She looked up at him from inside it like a small creature peering out from a den, and he felt something shift in him again. That same wordless thing, and he stood up and pulled his door shut behind him. "Let's go," he said. They walked in silence for half a block before she slipped her hand into his. He didn't react, not outwardly, but internally something locked and something unlocked at the exact same time. And he kept walking, and she kept holding on, and neither of them said anything about it. "Does your mom know you left?" he asked after a while. "No," Lily said. "She can't know. She's sleeping." "Right," he exhaled. "Does anyone else know?" "I knocked on Mrs. Petrov's door first, but she wasn't home. And the man on the second floor never opens his door." She paused. "I've been trying to wake Mom up since lunchtime. I made myself a peanut butter sandwich. There was only a little peanut butter left, so I used all of it." He looked down at her. "Are you still hungry?" he asked. "No," she said. "Well, a little, but that doesn't matter right now. Mom matters right now." He stopped walking. She stopped walking too and looked up at him. "How old are you, Lily?" he asked. 4.5, she said. "The half matters." He almost said something. He stopped himself. He started walking again. He had been 4 years old once. He remembered 4. He remembered what it felt like to be small in a world that wasn't paying attention to you, and to understand, with a clarity that no one prepares children for, that you were on your own, that the person who was supposed to be taking care of you wasn't going to, that you had to figure something out because no one was coming. He looked down at Lily, walking beside him in his oversized coat with her mismatched boots, holding his hand with total, unself-conscious trust, and he thought, she shouldn't have to know what that feels like yet. Apartment 4C was at the top of a narrow staircase that smelled like old carpet and cooking and something else underneath both of those. Something stale, the smell of a space where life had been struggling quietly for a long time. The door was unlocked. Lily pushed it open and walked in ahead of him, dropping his coat from her shoulders as she crossed the threshold. "Mom?" she called, the way children call even when they already know the answer. "I brought someone. He said he'd help." Milo stepped inside. The apartment was small. He took it in with the kind of automatic assessment he applied to all spaces. Exits, sight lines, variables. But underneath that reflex, he was seeing something else. He was seeing the way someone had tried very hard to make this place feel like a home. There were drawings taped to the refrigerator, a small plastic vase with fake flowers on the kitchen table, a worn quilt folded over the arm of the sofa with the careful precision of someone who wanted it to look intentional. And on the floor between the kitchen and the hallway, lying on her side with her dark hair spread around her face like a shadow, a woman. He moved. He crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck. Pulse, faint, but present. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. Her skin was cold damp, not cold still, which meant something. He looked at her face. She was pale in a way that wasn't natural. He looked at her wrists, her color, her posture. "Does your mom take any medicine?" he asked. His voice was level. He needed it to be level. "The little orange bottles," Lily said, and pointed toward the kitchen counter without hesitation, like she'd memorized where everything was. Because she had. "For her sugar. She always has to take them. She says if she forgets, it's dangerous." Milo looked at the counter. 3 prescription bottles. He checked the dates. One of them had been filled 6 days ago and was nearly empty. The other 2 were overdue for refills. He pulled out his phone, not to call his men, not to call anyone in his organization. He called 911 because this wasn't a situation for leverage or for favors. This was a woman lying on a kitchen floor and a 4-year-old girl watching from the doorway. And there was exactly one correct thing to do. "I need an ambulance, 14 Crane Street, apartment 4C, 4th floor. Woman, unresponsive, suspected diabetic emergency. Pulse is present, breathing is shallow." "Yes, I'll stay on the line." He stayed on the line. While he waited, he turned to Lily. She was standing very still. She wasn't crying. She was watching her mother the way you watch something when you're trying to decide if it's going to be okay. And you don't have enough information yet, so you just watch and wait and hold yourself very carefully together. "She's going to be okay," Milo said. Lily looked at him. "You don't know that yet," she said. He paused. "No, I don't. But I'm going to make sure people who do know what to do get here as fast as possible. That part I can promise you." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked over and sat down on the floor beside her mother, not touching her, just close, just present, the way animals sit with injured members of their group, not out of helplessness, but out of refusal to leave. He watched her do that, and something in the back of his throat tightened in a way he hadn't felt since he was a child himself. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. 8 minutes is not a long time in most contexts. In that apartment, sitting on the floor of someone else's kitchen, with a 4-year-old he'd met 25 minutes ago, and a woman he'd never seen before in his life, 8 minutes felt like a country. Lily talked to him, not because she was unafraid, but because she'd apparently decided that silence wasn't helping anything, and that talking was better. She told him her mother's name, Nora. She told him that Nora made the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the world, that she always put a little garlic on them, that she said it was the secret. She told him that they used to have a cat named Gerald, but Gerald had gone to live with a neighbor 6 months ago because Gerald needed more space. She said it with the careful delivery of a child repeating what an adult had told her, not quite believing it, but accepting it anyway. Milo listened. He was not a man who listened, as a general rule. Listening in his world was strategic. You listened for information, for weaknesses, for the thing people weren't saying underneath what they were saying. But this was different. He was just listening because she was talking, and she needed someone to hear her. "Are you a policeman?" she asked at one point. "No," he said. "A doctor?" "No." "Then what are you?" He considered the question seriously, the way it deserved. "Someone who helps people," he said finally. "Sometimes." She seemed to find this acceptable. When the paramedics knocked, Milo stood up and opened the door and stepped aside. They moved efficiently, asking him questions he answered clearly: symptoms, timing, medications, vitals as best he'd assess them. One of them glanced at him with the particular expression people wore when they recognized him and were deciding whether to react to that recognition. He held the man's gaze for 1 second, steady, unreadable, and the paramedic looked back down at his work. Lily stood near the wall, out of the way, her arms wrapped around herself. One of the paramedics, a younger woman, early 30s, with her hair pulled back tight and the calm efficiency of someone who'd seen everything twice, noticed Lily and stepped toward her. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "Is this your mom?" "Yes," Lily said. "Her name is Nora. She doesn't like hospitals, but she needs one right now." The paramedic looked at Milo over Lily's head with a quick question in her eyes. "Who are you to this child?" He didn't have an answer for that. "She came to find help," he said. "I was the closest one." They took Nora out on a stretcher. She was still unconscious, but her color was marginally better. One of the paramedics said something about blood sugar stabilizing, that they'd know more at the hospital. They moved quickly, professionally, with a particular focused energy of people who were very good at what they did. Lily walked alongside the stretcher as far as she could, holding the edge of it with one hand, not speaking, just keeping contact. When they got to the staircase and there wasn't room anymore, she stopped. She stood at the top of the stairs and watched them carry her mother down. And she didn't cry. Milo came to stand beside her. "Can I go with her?" Lily asked. Her voice was completely steady. "Yes," he said. "I'll take you." "You don't have to." "I know." She looked up at him. "You're not supposed to be nice," she said. "You look like someone who's not supposed to be nice." He didn't know whether to laugh or not. He settled for something in between. "I'm working on it," he said. She took his hand again as they went down the stairs. Outside, the ambulance lights cut through the falling snow in hard, alternating red and white. Lily watched them go. The ambulance didn't wait. It couldn't, and the sound of it faded down Crane Street until the night swallowed it. The snow fell. Lily stood on the sidewalk, still holding his hand, staring at the place where the ambulance had been. "She's going to be really scared when she wakes up," she said. "She doesn't like being alone." "She won't be alone," Milo said, and he heard himself say it before he'd fully decided to. The way some truths get out ahead of the decision to say them. "We're going to go there right now, so she's not alone when she wakes up." Lily looked up at him. That same reading look, that same careful animal accuracy. "You really mean that?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," he said, "I do." She turned back toward the street. "Okay," she said, "then let's go." He called for his car with one hand, the other still occupied by a 4-year-old who had not let go. While they waited, he became quietly, incrementally aware of the way his men were going to react to this. The calls he'd have to field, the questions he'd have to not answer, the version of himself he'd have to somehow explain. Milo Keating had never brought anyone into his private life. Not in 12 years of running the city's underworld. Not once. He had learned a long time ago that proximity to him was dangerous, that attachment was a liability, and that caring about something gave other people a weapon to use against you. He had lived by that rule without exception. He was standing on Crane Street in January with a 4-year-old girl in mismatched boots attached to his left hand, about to follow her mother to the hospital, and he had made a decision in under 3 seconds that 12 years of discipline said he should not have made. The car arrived. He opened the back door and helped Lily in, and she climbed across the seat and looked out the window with her hands in her lap, watching the snow. He got in beside her. The driver, Marco, who had worked for Milo for 9 years and had the particular gift of pretending not to notice things that were remarkable, said nothing. He simply drove. Lily pressed her small face close to the window. "Mr. Milo," she said quietly, still looking at the snow. "Just Milo," he said. "Milo." She said it like she was trying it out. "Is it okay to be scared?" He looked at her, at the side of her face, the small, serious profile of her. "Yeah," he said, "it's okay." Good. She exhaled slowly, a breath she'd apparently been holding for a while. Because I've been scared all day, I just didn't want to say it until someone said it was okay. Something happened to him then that he couldn't have predicted and couldn't have controlled. Something behind the center of his chest, between the ribs, a pressure that wasn't pain exactly, but was in the neighborhood of pain, like something that had been locked in a very small room for a very long time had just heard footsteps in the hall. He looked out his own window. The hospital was 15 blocks away. He thought about Nora, a woman he'd never met, lying in a moving ambulance, fighting something he didn't fully understand yet. A woman whose daughter had walked through the snow in mismatched boots because she'd run out of people to ask. A woman who had taped her daughter's drawings to the refrigerator and hidden fake flowers in a plastic vase and folded her quilt with precision. All the small heroisms of someone who was working very hard to make love look like it wasn't costing her everything. He thought about what it took to be that person, what it cost, what it wore down. And he thought about how she had no idea, right now, that the man who was bringing her daughter to her hospital bedside was the kind of man that most people in this city crossed the street to avoid. He wondered if that was going to matter. He thought, with an honesty that surprised him, that for the first time in a long time, he hoped it wouldn't. The automatic doors of Chicago Memorial opened in front of them, and Lily walked in without hesitating, small, purposeful, still wearing one Velcro boot and one wrong lace boot, still holding his hand. And when the woman at the admissions desk looked up and saw Milo Keating standing in her emergency room, her face went through 4 distinct expressions in under 2 seconds. Lily didn't notice. She stepped up to the counter on her toes and said, in a completely clear voice, "My mom's name is Nora Callahan. She just came in. She has sugar problems. I need to see her, please." The woman looked from the child to the man beside her. Milo said nothing. He just waited. And after a moment, the woman picked up her phone. The nurse at the desk made them wait. That was the first thing, the waiting. Milo Keating had not waited for anything in 11 years. Not a table, not a meeting, not a man who owed him an answer. Waiting was for people who didn't have options. And yet here he was, standing in a fluorescent-lit hallway that smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, next to a 4-year-old girl who was sitting in a plastic chair with her hands folded in her lap like a tiny, exhausted professional. And they were waiting. "She said 10 minutes, Lily said. "I know. It's been more than 10 minutes. "I know." Lily looked at him. "You could probably make them go faster," she said, with the uncanny perceptiveness of a child who had already read him more accurately than most adults managed in a year. "You look like someone who makes things go faster." He almost smiled. "Almost. Not here," he said. "Not tonight." She accepted that and looked back at the hallway. He watched the nurses move. He tracked the rhythms of the floor. Who was moving quickly? Who was calm? What the body language of the staff near the East Corridor said about the status of the woman who had just been brought in. He wasn't a doctor, but he'd spent enough years reading rooms to understand that no one was running. No one's voice had elevated. And that was something. That was information. "She's stable," he said, more to himself than to Lily. But Lily heard. "How do you know?" "Nobody's rushing," he said. "When it's very bad, people rush." She processed this with that same serious, unblinking focus she brought to everything. Then she nodded once, as if filing it away for future reference. "Okay," she said. "Good." A doctor came around the corner before the 10 minutes were up. Young, mid-30s maybe, with a slightly compressed look of someone who had been working a double shift and was halfway through their second cup of cold coffee. He looked at Lily first, then at Milo, and there it was again, that fractional recognition, that split-second recalibration that people made when they placed the face. "Are you family?" the doctor asked. "He's my," Lily started. "I brought the child," Milo said carefully. "Her mother has no one else right now. What's her condition?" The doctor glanced at Lily, then back at Milo, making the same quiet calculation the admissions nurse had made. He landed, apparently, on the same answer. She came in hypoglycemic, severe episode. Her blood sugar was critically low. She's responsive now, disoriented but conscious. He paused. She's asking for her daughter. Lily was out of the chair before he finished the sentence. Hey, slow down, the doctor started. Room number, Milo said. Sir, visiting hours. Room number. His voice didn't rise. It never rose. It simply became the kind of quiet that communicated clearly that this was the only answer being accepted right now. The doctor looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Bay 7, he said. Down the hall, left at the blue line. Keep it calm, she needs rest. Lily was already moving. Milo followed. She found room 7 before he did. The curtain was half pulled. Lily pushed it aside and went in and said, Mom, in a voice that finally broke. Just at the edge, just enough to show what all that careful steadiness had been holding back all night. Milo stopped at the curtain. Inside, Nora Callahan was sitting up slightly in the hospital bed. She was pale, and there were tubes at her arm, and her dark hair was loose around her face the same way it had been on the kitchen floor. But her eyes were open. They were dark, like lilies, and the second they landed on her daughter, something happened in them that Milo recognized without needing a word for it. Relief so total, it looked like it hurt. Baby, Nora said, and opened her arms, and Lily climbed up onto the bed without hesitation, without asking, and pressed herself against her mother's side, and Nora wrapped both arms around her and held on with the grip of someone who'd just been very close to not being able to do that anymore. Milo stood at the curtain and did not go in. He was not sure why. Something told him that this moment was not his, that the most useful thing he could be right now was not present. He was good at that, at understanding which spaces were his to occupy and which ones needed him to stay outside. He had just never applied that instinct to something he actually wanted to walk into. He stood there and watched through the gap in the curtain, and the thing in his chest that had been doing that pressure behind the ribs thing since Crane Street did it again, sharper this time. Nora was speaking quietly to Lily. Low, broken sentences, the kind you used when you were still shaking from the inside. She was stroking Lily's hair with one hand, the way you do when you need to confirm something is real by touching it repeatedly. I'm okay, she kept saying. I'm right here. I'm okay. I know, Lily said. I got help. Nora looked up then, over Lily's head, and she saw Milo. The moment lasted perhaps 3 seconds. It covered considerable ground. She didn't know him, that was clear. There was no recognition in her eyes, not the sharp kind he usually got. What she had instead was a kind of raw, unguarded assessment, the way people looked at strangers when they were too exhausted and too relieved to construct the usual social filters. She was trying to understand what she was seeing. A large man in an expensive shirt standing at the curtain of her hospital room, who had apparently been the one to bring her daughter here, who was watching her with an expression she clearly couldn't categorize. You, she started. Her voice was rough. You're the one who called the ambulance? Yes, he said. And you brought Lily? She found me, he said. I just walked with her. Nora looked at Lily. You walked to a stranger's house? He's not strange, Lily said with complete confidence. He's Milo. He helped. Something moved across Nora's face. A mother's particular complex expression. Gratitude and fear arriving at the same time because a strange man had helped her daughter, and that was both a relief and a thing that required a complete re-examination of every choice that had led to tonight. Thank you, she said, looking at him directly. I don't... She stopped, started again. Thank you. You don't need to say anything, he said. No, she said quietly. I do. Her jaw tightened slightly. the kind of tightening that happened when someone was holding a bigger emotion at arm's length. My 4-year-old knocked on a stranger's door tonight because I collapsed on my kitchen floor. I need to say thank you, and I need to say, I'm sorry, to her. She looked down at Lily. I'm sorry you were scared, baby. It's okay, Lily said against her mother's shoulder. It's not okay. Nora's voice dropped to almost nothing. But we're going to fix it. Milo said nothing. He stood there and he listened to a woman who had just come back from a medical emergency, who was still attached to an IV, who was still pale, who was probably still not fully sure where she was, apologize to her daughter. Not later, not when she felt better. Right now, in the first 30 seconds of consciousness. He had known a lot of people who would have done the opposite, who would have deflected or changed the subject or waited until the discomfort faded and the feeling became something manageable before they addressed it. Nora Callahan had done none of that. He took a step back from the curtain, giving them space. He found a chair in the hallway and sat in it. He leaned back. He closed his eyes for 30 seconds and let himself process the last 2 hours. When he opened them, the young doctor was standing a few feet away, writing something on a clipboard, glancing at him sideways. You can ask, Milo said. The doctor looked up. I wasn't. You were. Milo wasn't irritated, he was just direct. Ask. The doctor set the clipboard down slightly. She has no emergency contact listed, he said. She came in alone. That little girl, Lily, is she going to have someone to stay with tonight? Because we're keeping Ms. Callahan until morning minimum, and we can't. She stays with me, Milo said. The words came out exactly the same way the ones on Crane Street had, ahead of the decision to say them, bypassing the 11 years of discipline that said proximity to him was dangerous. He heard himself say it and felt the truth of it settle into place without argument. The doctor blinked. What's your relationship to? She stays with me, he said again. And then because the man looked like he was going to require something more concrete, I'm going to sit in that hallway until Ms. Callahan is discharged tomorrow morning. The child isn't going anywhere without her mother, and I'm not leaving until both of them are taken care of. You can put that in your notes. The doctor stared at him for a long moment. Then he wrote something on the clipboard and walked away without further questions. Milo leaned back in the chair. His phone had 3 missed calls, all from the same number, Decker, his second in command, who ran operations when Milo was occupied and who had the particular talent of not overreacting to anything, which was why Milo had kept him around for 8 years. He called back. Boss. Decker's voice was careful, measured. Marco called in, said you went to Chicago Memorial. I did. A beat. Everything okay? A woman needed help, Milo said. It's handled. Another beat, longer this time. You need anything? Milo considered. Have someone bring food to the waiting room at Chicago Memorial, Bay 7 corridor. Something for a 4-year-old. Whatever she'd actually eat. Silence on the line for 3 full seconds. He knew what that silence meant. It meant Decker was revising his model of what was happening here and wasn't sure yet what model to replace it with. Copy that, Decker said finally. Anything else? Clear my morning. Done. He hung up. He sat in the hallway chair. He thought about the refrigerator with the drawings on it. He thought about the plastic vase with the fake flowers. He thought about a woman who had arranged things to look like love wasn't costing her everything, and how it clearly was, and how she'd still been doing it anyway. He thought about the overdue prescription bottles on the kitchen counter, and the way a person's health didn't just spontaneously fail. It failed in stages, preceded by smaller warnings that you either couldn't afford to address or couldn't afford to slow down long enough to address, which amounted to the same thing. He thought about Lily walking through the January snow in mismatched boots because she'd run out of options. He thought, this didn't happen in one night. This has been happening for a long time. From inside base 7, he heard Lily ask Nora something in a low voice. He didn't catch the words. He heard Nora laugh, soft and a little raw, the laugh of someone who hadn't expected to be doing that this evening, but was profoundly grateful for the reason to. The laugh did something to him. He was still sitting with that when the curtain moved and Lily came out, still in her mismatched boots, holding a small foam cup of apple juice that one of the nurses had apparently produced. She looked up and down the hallway, spotted him, and walked over with the unhurried certainty of a child who has decided that she knows where she belongs right now. She sat down in the chair next to him. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. "She wants to meet you properly," Lily said. "I know." "She's embarrassed," Lily said. "She doesn't like people seeing her when things aren't okay. She's like that." He looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because she made me brush my hair before the ambulance lady could see me," Lily said plainly. "Even while she was sick. She said you should always look like you have it together, even when you don't." He absorbed that, filed it away. It told him more about Nora Callahan in 14 words than most people manage to communicate in a full conversation. "She'll be okay," Lily said, not asking, saying it like she was deciding it. "Yeah," he said, "she will." "Because you're going to make sure," Lily said, again not a question. He looked at her, at this 4-year-old who had navigated this entire impossible evening with more composure than most of his associates managed in routine situations, who had knocked on a stranger's door in the snow, who had held her fear in both hands all day because she decided it wasn't useful yet, who was now sitting in a hospital hallway, drinking apple juice and stating facts. "Yeah," he said again, quieter this time, "because I'm going to make sure." Lily nodded once and drank her juice. He went in to meet Nora 10 minutes later. She was sitting up a little more. Some color had come back to her face. Not a lot, but enough. Her hands were folded in her lap over the thin hospital blanket, and her chin was up in the careful way of someone who had decided that whatever was about to happen, they were going to face it with their eyes open. He recognized that posture. He used it himself. "Mr." she started. "Milo," he said. She took a breath. "Milo, I don't." She stopped, recalibrated, started again, differently. "I don't know how to do this. I'm not good at being helped. I want you to know that up front, so that if I say something wrong, you'll understand it's not." She stopped again. Her jaw worked slightly. "I don't know how to say thank you for something this big." "You don't have to make it bigger than it is," he said. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down, which he'd done deliberately. He didn't want to be standing over her right now. He wanted to be level. "A little girl came to my door. I walked with her. That's what happened." Nora looked at him carefully. He had the distinct sense that she was doing the same thing her daughter did, reading him, measuring the gap between what he was saying and what he was. She was good at it, better than most. "Where do you live?" she asked. "Harrington Court." She blinked, just once. Harrington Court was not a street that meant nothing in this city. It was the kind of address that told you things. She knew that. He watched her know it. "Lily walked pretty far," she said carefully. "She did. To your door specifically." "I don't know why specifically," he said, which was true. He had no idea why Lily had ended up at his door, rather than any other door on that street. He wasn't sure he wanted to examine that too closely tonight. Nora was quiet for a moment. Her eyes didn't leave his face. "Are you someone I should be afraid of?" she asked. The directness of it caught him. Not because it was unexpected. He'd been asked variations of this question many times. But because she asked it with no performance of fear, no apology for the asking. She asked it the way you asked a doctor if the thing they found was serious, not wanting to be afraid, but needing to know the truth more than you needed the comfort of not knowing. He owed her the same kind of answer. "Some people think so," he said. "That's not what I asked." He held her gaze. "No," he said, "not to you. not to her. The silence that followed was the kind that wasn't empty. It was full of evaluation and calculation and something else, something quieter, something that neither of them was quite ready to name. Then the door swung back, and Lily came in holding a paper bag with a grease stain on the bottom, and said, "A man in a black coat brought food. He said it was from Milo. There's a sandwich and chips and 2 cookies and something in foil that I don't know what it is." Nora looked at Milo. "I had food sent," he said simply. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the bag, then looked at him again with an expression that was doing several things simultaneously: gratitude, resistance, the very specific pride of someone who had been taking care of themselves and their child on their own for long enough that being taken care of by someone else felt like something between relief and surrender. And she wasn't sure yet which one to let win. "Eat," Lily said, holding the bag out to her mother. "You have to eat because of the sugar thing," the doctor said. Nora took the bag. She looked at Milo one more time. "Thank you," she said. And this time it came out differently than before. Not the formal, obligated thank you of a person managing a social transaction. It came out like something real, like something that cost her. He nodded once. Lily climbed back onto the bed and pressed against her mother's side, and Nora opened the bag and took out the sandwich. And for a few minutes, the room was simply quiet and warm and full of the small sounds of a child leaning against her mother and a woman eating something because someone else had thought to make sure she could. Milo sat in the chair. He should have left. He knew that. He had run operations from this city for over a decade, and there was always something that needed him: a call to return, a decision to make, a situation that required his presence to resolve. There was always a reason to be somewhere else. He sat in the chair, and he did not leave. At some point, Lily fell asleep against her mother's shoulder. Nora held her with one arm and watched the window and didn't speak for a while. Then quietly, without looking at him, "She's never done that before," she said. "Walked to find someone. She must have been terrified." "She was scared," he said. "She told me, but she didn't stop." Nora's throat moved. "She's braver than me," she said softly. "She always has been." He thought about saying something. He thought about the easy reassurance, "I'm sure that's not true." And he knew it would ring hollow, and she'd know it too. So he said something different. "She got it from somewhere," he said. Nora looked at him then, fully, directly, without the guarded measuring she'd been using all evening. Just looked at him, this stranger in her hospital room who had brought her daughter through the snow and called the ambulance and sent food and stayed and was now saying the kind of thing that people said when they saw you. Really saw you. Her eyes went bright for a second, just a second. Then she looked back at the window. "You should go home," she said. "You've done more than enough." "I know," he said. He didn't move. She turned to look at him again, and this time there was something almost like a challenge in it. "You said you know, so why are you still here?" And he met it without apology. "I'll go when the morning shift comes in," he said. "Doctor said they'd discharge you by 9. I'll drive you both home." "You don't—" "I know I don't have to," he said quietly but completely. "I know that. I'm still going to." She stared at him. He stared back. Between them, Lily slept on, entirely unbothered, as if she'd always known this was how the night was going to end. The two of them, figuring out what it meant that he was still here, while she slept safely in the space she'd pulled into existence by walking through the snow in mismatched boots to knock on a stranger's door. "You're very strange," Nora said finally, and there was just the thinnest edge of something warm in it. "So I've been told," he said. She almost smiled. He saw it start and stop, and he thought, sitting in a hospital chair at nearly midnight, in a world that was nothing like the one he'd been standing in 6 hours ago, that he didn't mind being strange, if strange was what this was. He was there at 9, not at 9:05, not at 8:58, at 9 exactly, the way a man shows up when he said he would, Because in his world, the only currency more durable than money was your word. And he had not gotten this far by being someone who said things he didn't mean. The discharge paperwork took 40 minutes because the hospital was understaffed and the printer on the third floor was jammed and nobody could find the attending physician who needed to sign the release form. Milo sat in the hallway and waited and did not say a word about any of it, which Nora noticed. She'd been watching him since she woke up, carefully from the side, the way you watch something you're not sure about yet, trying to find the angle that made him make sense. She hadn't found it yet. "You stayed all night," she said, when Lily was down the hall getting her coat from the nurse's station. "I slept a few hours," he said, "in the chair." "In the chair." She said it flatly, like she was checking that she'd heard correctly. "It wasn't the worst chair I've ever slept in." She stared at him. "Why?" she asked. Not aggressively, not accusingly, just directly, the way she'd asked everything, like she needed the actual answer, not the polished version. "Because I said I'd be here in the morning," he said. "People say things." "I know." He met her eyes. "I'm not most people." She held his gaze for a long moment, then she looked away first. Not because she was backing down, he thought, but because the answer had landed somewhere it wasn't entirely comfortable, and she needed a second with that. Lily came back with her coat on and both boots correctly laced, which meant a nurse had helped her, and she looked up at Milo with the complete, uncomplicated satisfaction of someone whose plan had worked out exactly as expected. "Told you," she said. "Told me what?" he asked. "That you'd still be here." She said it simply, tugging her sleeve straight. "Mom didn't believe me." Nora made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite an argument. He drove them home. The car was warm, and Lily fell asleep within 4 minutes of pulling out of the hospital parking structure. The deep, uncomplicated sleep of a child who had been running on adrenaline for 18 hours and had finally decided the crisis was over and rest was permitted. She was curled against the door with her cheek on her hand, and her breathing slowed and steadied, and the sound of it filled the back seat like something gentle. In the front, Nora sat with her hands in her lap and looked out the window. She hadn't said anything since they'd gotten in the car, but it wasn't the silence of someone who had nothing to say. It was the silence of someone caring too much to say any of it casually. He let it be. 3 blocks from the hospital, she said quietly, "The prescriptions are overdue." "I know," he said. He'd seen the bottles. "I had a plan to get them filled this week." Her voice was level, but there was something underneath it, the particular strain of a person who has been managing a crisis through sheer organizational effort and is now sitting in the wreckage of a plan that didn't hold. "I was going to pick up an extra shift on Thursday. The pharmacy gives a discount if you pay a certain amount up front. I had it figured out." "Okay," he said. "I'm not telling you that because I want something," she said, and there was an edge in it. Quick, clean, defensive. "I'm telling you so you understand that this wasn't—" She stopped. "I don't let things get this bad. Usually." "I know." She turned to look at him. "You don't know me." "No," he said, "but I know what I saw in that apartment." "What did you see?" "Someone working very hard," he said. "Someone who drew the flowers on with a marker, but bought the vase anyway. Someone whose kid knows exactly where the medicine is and what it does and why it matters. That doesn't happen unless someone taught her. That doesn't happen unless someone has been paying attention for a long time." He paused. "You didn't stop paying attention. You got sick. Those aren't the same thing." Nora was quiet for a long time after that. When she spoke, her voice was different, smaller. Not weaker, smaller, the way a voice gets when it drops the performance and becomes just the person underneath. "I drew the flowers on with a nail polish pen," she said. "From the dollar section. Lily picked the colors. Yellow and orange," he said. He'd seen them. "She said those were the happiest colors." A pause. "She was 2.5 when she picked them." He drove. The city moved past outside. Chicago in January, still gray and unrelenting, but it didn't feel the same as it had last night. They reached Crane Street. He parked. He carried Lily upstairs because she was still asleep and Nora's hands were shaking slightly. Not dramatically, not in a way she'd have admitted, but enough. He noticed. He didn't say anything about it. He laid Lily on the sofa and she stirred and said, "Garlic sandwich," in her sleep, which was apparently about her mother's grilled cheese, and then settled back into unconsciousness without surfacing further. Nora stood in the middle of her own kitchen and looked around it. He watched her look. He understood what she was doing. She was taking inventory, assessing the gap between where things were and where they needed to be. He recognized that particular mental process because he did the same thing every time he entered a room. She saw the empty peanut butter jar on the counter, the one Lily had scraped clean for her lone sandwich the night before. She picked it up and held it, and her face did something complicated in private, and then she put it in the recycling without a word. "Sit down," he said. She turned. "I'm fine." "You were discharged 90 minutes ago from a diabetic episode serious enough to render you unconscious for 12 hours, he said. "Sit down." She sat down, not because she wanted to, her expression made that clear, but because her body had apparently reached the end of its willingness to argue with what was medically obvious. He found the kettle, filled it, set it going, opened the refrigerator and took a silent inventory of what was and wasn't there. "You don't have to do that," she said from the table. "I know." Milo. His name in her mouth sounded different from Lily's version, more careful. "I need you to understand something. I am grateful, genuinely, completely grateful for what you did last night. What you did was..." She stopped, pressed her hands flat on the table. "It was extraordinary, and I will find a way to repay it. I don't know how yet, but I will." She looked at him directly. "But I can't let you keep doing this. I can't let Lily keep..." She stopped again. He turned from the counter. "Keep what?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Getting attached," she said quietly. "She's 4. She doesn't understand what this is or isn't. She thinks you're..." She shook her head slightly. "I've been alone with her for 2 years. There's been no one. And you walk in and you're kind and you stay and you show up and she already..." Her voice tightened. "She already looks at you like you're staying." The kettle began to hum. He stood there and he took that in. He took in what she was saying, and more importantly, what she was protecting, which was her daughter, and the particular fragility of a child who had gone without something long enough that any substitute for it might become load-bearing too fast. "I understand," he said. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I know. I'm trying to be honest because I think you respond to honest." She was watching him carefully. "I think you hear it better than most people, so I'm being honest with you." "You're right," he said, and he meant it. "About all of it." She blinked. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The kettle was still building behind him. "You're right that she's already attached. You're right that I've been showing up like someone who's staying. And you're right that I should tell you what that means, because you deserve to know what's actually happening instead of trying to figure it out from the outside." He paused. "I don't know what I'm doing here, Nora. I want to be honest about that too. I don't do this, any of this. The hospital, the driving, He gestured at the kettle, the counter, the table. "None of this is something I do." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because your daughter knocked on my door in the snow," he said, "and something I thought was done happening in me started again." The silence that followed that was the loudest one yet. The kettle clicked off. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Nora said very quietly, "What was done happening?" He looked at his hands on the table. "Caring about what happens next," he said. She sat with that. She didn't immediately fill the space with reassurance or deflection or any of the things people usually did when a conversation got too real, too fast. She just sat with it, the way someone sits with something that's heavier than expected, and they're deciding whether they have the strength to hold it. "Who are you?" she said finally. "Not Who are you in the city? Not, what do you do? Just, who are you? The oldest and most honest version of the question. Complicated, he said. That's not an answer. No, he said, it's not. He looked at her. The answer is going to change things. I want you to know that before I say it. She didn't look away. Tell me anyway. He told her. Not everything. Not the architecture of the empire. Not the names. Not the machinery. But enough. Enough that she would know why people stepped back when they recognized his face. Enough that she could make an informed decision about what she was willing to allow into her home and her daughter's life. He watched her face while he talked. He was good at reading faces. He'd built a career on it. What he saw was not what he expected. He expected fear. He got something closer to exhaustion. The expression of someone hearing information they'd half already guessed, having it confirmed, and rearranging what they knew accordingly. The coat, she said when he was done. The car. The food at the hospital. Yes. The way the nurses stopped asking questions. Yes. She nodded slowly, absorbing, processing. And you're telling me this because you asked, he said, and because you're not stupid and you would have figured it out. And I'd rather you know from me than from someone else on a day when I'm not in the room to answer for it. She looked at the table. Her hands were still flat on it, still shaking slightly. He wasn't sure if that was the aftermath of the medical episode or the aftermath of this conversation. Are we in danger? She asked. Low, direct, the way a mother asks the question that matters most. Not from me, he said, not ever. But from what you are. He didn't answer that immediately, because the honest answer was complicated, and she deserved the complicated version, not the reassuring one. I'm careful, he said finally. I have always been careful about keeping my life separate from, he stopped, from anything that matters. And we're something that matters, she said, not warmly, not coldly, just factually, the way she seemed to state most things. Apparently, he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she got up, turned to the counter, made 2 cups of tea with the hot water from the kettle, brought them back and set one in front of him. She sat back down. She wrapped both hands around her cup and looked at the steam rising from it. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with all of this, she said. I'm not. I need to think. I need time to think. She looked at him. But I'm also sitting here because of you. Lily is sleeping on that couch because of you. So I can't just, she pressed her lips together. I'm not good at this either, she said. Being helped, being seen, all of it. I know, he said. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. The corner of her mouth moved, just barely, almost against her will. You're very strange, she said, for the second time, and this time there was no question that it was warm. You've mentioned that, he said. She drank her tea. He drank his. From the sofa, Lily made a soft sound in her sleep and resettled, and both of them looked over automatically and then back. And in the looking back, their eyes met for a second longer than necessary, and both of them let that pass without commenting on it. This was the part of the morning that Milo had not planned for, the part after the urgency, after the crisis, when the ordinary settled back in and you had to decide what you were to each other in the absence of emergency. He was good at emergencies. He had no practice with this. He was learning. He was about to say something. He wasn't sure what, when his phone buzzed. He looked at it out of habit. Decker. Not a call, a text. 2 words. We have a problem. He looked at the phone. He looked at Nora. She was watching him. She'd seen his expression change. Not much, but enough. She was perceptive enough to have caught it. You need to go, she said. I'm not Milo. The way she said his name this time was different from all the previous times. Like she'd figured out exactly how to hold it, not carefully, not tentatively, but straight. You need to go. Whatever that is, it's not nothing. I can see it on your face. She held his gaze. Go, we'll be okay. He didn't want to go. That was the simple truth of it. And it was so profoundly unfamiliar that he sat there for 3 full seconds, just locating it in himself. Because he'd spent 12 years building a life where wanting to stay somewhere was not a sensation he had access to. He stood up. He put his phone back in his pocket. He looked at Lily on the sofa. She was still asleep, one arm dangling, utterly peaceful. I'm going to have someone come by, he said. Not to, he stopped, recalibrated, to fill the prescriptions, and to bring food. You don't have to accept it, he looked at her, but I'm going to send it anyway. She opened her mouth. Nora, he said her name for the first time. He watched something move across her face when he did. You almost didn't wake up yesterday morning. Let me do this one thing without it being a war. A long beat. One thing, she said. One thing, he said. She nodded once. He crossed to the door, had his hand on the handle, and then, because he was learning that she was someone who needed to be told the real thing and not the performed version, I'm coming back, he said, without turning around. Not because you need me to, because I want to, and you should know that so you can decide what to do with it. He heard her exhale slowly behind him. He opened the door. Milo. Her voice stopped him on the threshold. He turned. She was still sitting at the table, both hands around her teacup, looking at him with that expression that was doing too many things at once. Fear and gratitude and resistance and something that wasn't any of those things. Something quieter and more dangerous than any of them. Be careful, she said. It was such a simple thing to say. 2 words. The kind of thing people said automatically, reflexively, to people they didn't want something to happen to. He'd had people wish him good luck before. He'd had people tell him to be smart, be fast, be clean. Nobody had told him to be careful in a very long time. Not in the way she meant it. Not in the way that meant, I would like you to come back. He stood in the doorway for 1 more second. Yeah, he said, I will. And then he went. He was 3 blocks away when Decker called again, and this time the news landed like something cold dropping through him. Because the problem wasn't a business problem, wasn't a logistics problem, wasn't the kind of problem he solved with a phone call and a correction. The problem was that someone had been watching Crane Street last night, and they had seen him. Someone had been watching Crane Street. Decker said it the way he said everything, flat, efficient, stripped of drama, because Decker understood that drama was a luxury and information was the only thing that mattered in the first 30 seconds of a problem. A black sedan parked at the corner of Crane and Aldine since approximately 8 the previous evening. Different plates than this morning, which meant someone had been thoughtful enough to rotate, which meant it wasn't amateur. How long have you known? Milo asked. Since this morning. Marco noticed the switch when he drove you out. Why didn't he say something while I was in the car? A pause. The child was in the car. Milo said nothing for a moment. He was standing on the sidewalk 2 blocks from Crane Street, and the cold was moving through his coat like it had an appointment. And his mind was already doing the thing it did in these moments. Not panicking, never panicking, but running every thread at once, pulling on each one to see what unraveled. Who? He asked. Not confirmed, possibly Rice. Rice. Victor Rice, who ran the North Side and had been looking for leverage against Milo for the better part of 3 years, and hadn't found any because Milo had been meticulous about giving him nothing. No weakness, no attachment, no soft points. Nothing that could be picked up and used. Until last night. Has anyone approached the building? Milo asked. Not yet. Yet, he repeated. It's early, Decker said quietly. Milo turned and looked back down Crane Street, 4th floor, the yellow building. He couldn't see the window from here, but he knew exactly where it was. Pull 2 men, he said. I want them on that building. Quiet. I don't want them visible. I don't want them knocking on doors. I don't want anyone in that building to know they're there. watching only. Copy. And Decker, his voice dropped a register. If anything moves on that street, anything, I want to know before it finishes moving. Understood. He hung up. He stood on the sidewalk and breathed once, slowly, through his nose. He had made a mistake. Not walking with Lily, he would make that choice again without hesitation. But he had been careless about the afterward. He had been so focused on the woman and the child that he had let his awareness of everything else go soft. And in his world, soft awareness had consequences. He knew this. He had known it since he was 19 years old and had learned the lesson in a way that left a scar he still carried. He had known it, and for one night, he had set it aside. He started walking, not back to Crane Street, not yet. He had work to do first, and showing up there again immediately, twice in one morning, would only confirm whatever Rice's man had already seen and reported. Distance was protection. Distance was the best thing he could give them right now, even if it was the last thing he wanted. He walked, and he thought about Nora sitting at her kitchen table with both hands around a teacup, telling him to be careful. He thought, she has no idea what that means yet. And then harder, she can't find out from someone else. He had told her enough last night, enough for her to understand the shape of what he was. But shape and detail were different things, and there were details about the nature of his world that she wasn't ready for, and he wasn't ready to give her. Not yet. Not in a hospital room at midnight. He pulled out his phone and called a number he rarely used. It rang 4 times. "It's been a while," said the voice on the other end, female, older, with the particular dryness of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "I need information on Victor Reese's current activity on the South Side," Milo said. A brief silence. "That's not a small request." "I know what it is." "Is this about Crane Street?" He stopped walking. "You already know." "I know everything that happens in this city before breakfast, Milo. You know that." Another pause, and the voice softened. Not much, just at the edge. "You stayed at Chicago Memorial all night. People noticed. People talk." A beat. She must be something. "Don't," he said. "I'm not doing anything. I'm stating an observation." A pause. "I'll find out what Reese knows. Give me until tonight." "Tonight is too long." "Then until this afternoon." "But Milo, if Rice has already connected her to you, moving too fast is worse than moving at all. You know this." He knew this. "This afternoon," he said, and hung up. He stood there. 20 years of building an empire where he was untouchable, and it had taken one night, one small girl in mismatched boots, to produce the first real crack in the wall. He should have been angry about that. He searched himself for the anger and found, in its place, something that was almost the opposite, something that felt almost like relief, like some part of him had been waiting, without knowing it, for something worth cracking the wall for. He pushed that aside for now. Sentiment was a thing you could afford after the problem was solved, and not before. He called Marco and had the car brought around. He had 3 meetings he'd pushed and couldn't push again, 2 decisions that required his physical presence, and an afternoon built entirely of things that were going to demand every part of his attention. He did all of them. He sat across tables from men who owed him things, and men he owed things to. And he spoke and listened and negotiated and decided. And to every person in every room, he was exactly what he always was, clear-eyed, unreadable, present. In between, he thought about a little girl who said the half of her age mattered. At 2:47 in the afternoon, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. He looked at it. "Hi, it's Nora. Lily wanted to say thank you. I told her to draw you something instead because she expresses herself better that way. I'm attaching a photo." He stared at the text for a moment. Then the photo came through. A child's drawing, crayon, 3 figures, one very large, one medium, one very small with what appeared to be a cape. all holding hands. The large figure had been given an enormous amount of black scribbled hair, which he understood was his coat. Underneath, in handwriting that was almost legible, in Nora's hand, Lily says, "That's Milo. That's Mommy. That's me. I gave him a cape because he's like a superhero, but without the costume." He looked at that drawing for longer than he would have admitted. Then he typed back, "Tell her the cape is my favorite part. How are you feeling?" 3 minutes passed. Better, tired, embarrassed still. The prescriptions came. "You should know I almost sent them back." "Why didn't you?" Another pause. "Because Lily intercepted the delivery man and he gave her a lollipop, and after that she considered the whole thing non-negotiable." He almost smiled. He did smile, in the privacy of his own car, alone. "Smart kid. You have no idea." He put the phone down, picked it up again. "I need to tell you something, not over the phone, tonight, if possible." The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. She was choosing her words. He waited. "That sounds like something I should be worried about. It's something you need to know. I'd rather you hear it from me." A longer pause this time. "Lily goes to sleep at 7:30. After that, I'll be there at 8. He put the phone away and looked out the window of the car. He had approximately 5 hours to figure out how to tell a woman he'd known for less than 24 hours that his presence in her life might have already placed her in the crosshairs of someone who had no qualms about using whatever was available to get what he wanted. He didn't think there was a good way to do it. He was going to do it anyway, because she'd asked him to be honest and he'd agreed, and because the worst thing he could imagine right now, worse than the threat, worse than Reese, worse than any operational complication, was Nora Callahan finding out from someone else that the man who had brought her daughter through the snow was also the reason she wasn't safe. At 4:15, the contact called back. "Reese knows," she said, and Milo's jaw tightened. "His man saw you on Crane Street last night. He's been asking questions about the address since this morning. He doesn't know the name yet, but he will, probably by tomorrow." "What does he think he can use it for?" "He thinks it's leverage. He's been looking for a personal angle on you for a long time." A pause. "He's going to approach her, Milo. That's his pattern. He doesn't go through the person. He goes around them, through whoever they're connected to. He'll make contact with her directly." "When?" "If I had to guess, tomorrow. He likes to move fast before the target understands what's happening." Milo was quiet. "You need to get them out of that apartment," she said. "I know. She's not going to like that." "I know that too. Do you need anything from me?" "Not yet," he said, "but stay close." He hung up and sat with the information for exactly 60 seconds. Then he made a decision, the same way he made all decisions, without the luxury of taking longer than the situation allowed, and called Decker. "I need the property on Linden prepped by tomorrow morning," he said. "Clean, staffed, everything running. 2 bedrooms minimum." Decker was quiet for a moment. "For how long?" "Until I say otherwise." A pause that told Milo exactly how much his second-in-command was reassessing the landscape of his boss's life. "Consider it done," Decker said. He arrived at Crane Street at 8 o'clock. Nora opened the door before he knocked. She'd been listening for him, and he knew it, and she knew he knew it, and neither of them mentioned it. She looked better than the morning, still pale around the eyes, still moving with the careful deliberateness of someone whose body was reminding them they'd been through something, but upright, present, alert in the specific way she was always alert, like someone who had learned that the space between what was coming and when it arrived was the only time they had to prepare. "She's asleep?" he asked. "Yes." She stepped back to let him in. "You said you had something to tell me, so tell me." No preamble, no small talk. He'd expected that. He sat down at the table, same chairs, same kitchen that still smelled faintly like the tea from this morning, and she sat across from him in the exact same position, and he told her. He told her about Rice, about the sedan on the corner, about what Rice did with leverage and how he used it, and what the contact had said about his pattern. He told her clearly and without softening any of it, because she had asked for honesty, and this was the part of honesty that came with a cost. He watched her face while he talked. She didn't go pale. She didn't go silent in the shattered way. She went silent in the concentrated way. The way someone goes silent when they're taking in information they need to act on. Her hands were flat on the table, and her jaw was set, and her eyes didn't leave his face. When he was done, she said, "So because you came here last night, someone dangerous now knows where we live." "Yes." She breathed in slowly, out slowly. "And you came back tonight to tell me." "Yes." "You could have not come back," she said. "You could have just handled it from a distance, put people on the building, not told me. Most people in your position would not have come back to tell me." "I know, but you came back." She looked at him steadily. "Because you said you'd come back." "Yes." Another long, loaded silence. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. He blinked. Of everything she could have said in this moment, that was the answer he hadn't built for. Not "how could you?" Not "get out of my apartment." Not the fear or the accusation that would have been completely warranted. Just, "What do you need me to do?" "I have a property," he said carefully, "on Linden, safe, secure, staffed. I want you and Lily to stay there while I resolve this." "How long?" "Days. A week at most." She looked at him. "A week. Possibly less. In your house. It's a separate property. You would have full—" "Milo," she cut him off gently but completely. "I understand what you're saying. I understand why." She pressed her lips together. "What I need to know is whether I have a choice." He heard what was underneath that question. It wasn't, "Will you force me?" She knew the answer to that. It was something older. Something about the difference between choosing something and having it chosen for you, and how that difference mattered to someone who had been making their own choices, alone, for a very long time. "You have a choice," he said. "You always have a choice. I'm asking, not telling." She looked at him for a long moment. "Lily's going to be excited," she said finally. "She's going to think it's an adventure." "Is that a yes?" She exhaled to her nose. "It's a yes." A pause. "It's a yes that comes with a list of conditions." "Tell me the conditions." "I choose when we leave and when we come back. I have my own space. You don't make decisions for us without talking to me first. And—" She stopped. Her eyes held his steadily. "You don't let Lily get more attached than she already is. She can't—" Her voice dropped. "She can't lose someone else she's decided is safe. I can't let that happen to her." He sat with that. "Someone else," he said quietly. Nora's expression shifted slightly. She hadn't meant to say it that way. He saw her recognize that she had. "Her father," she said. Flat, simple, no invitation for more. "He left when she was 2. She doesn't remember him, but I do." She held his gaze. "I know what it does to a child when someone they've decided to trust just isn't there anymore. I'm not doing that to her again." He understood now what he was actually being asked. Not just to move them to a safe house, not just to resolve a threat. He was being asked, by a woman who had been hurt in a very specific way, to make a decision about what kind of person he was going to be to her daughter, and to make it consciously, in advance, before Lily got any deeper than she already was. He sat with that honestly. He didn't rush it. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. And then, because he'd promised her the real version and not the performed one, "I don't know what this is yet. I don't think you do either. But I'm not the kind of man who disappears. That's the one thing I can tell you right now with complete certainty." She held his gaze for a long time. Something in her face shifted. Not all the way, not into trust, not yet. But the resistance that had been in it since the hospital moved slightly. The way a locked door moves when the right key is tried, and the person on the other side is deciding whether to turn it all the way. "Okay," she said. It came out quietly, like a thing that cost something. "Okay," he said back. She looked at her hands on the table. "I'll pack in the morning, before Lily wakes up if I can, so I can tell her it's an adventure before she knows it's not." "It can be both," he said. She almost smiled. That same almost against her will. "You're very," she started. "Strange," he said. "I know." And this time she actually smiled. Small, brief, quickly folded back away, but real. The realest thing he'd seen in a long time. He stood up to leave. At the door, she said his name again. He turned. She was standing in the middle of the kitchen with her arms crossed, not defensively, just holding herself. The way people held themselves when they were containing something they weren't ready to put down yet. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me, for coming back to tell me when you didn't have to." "I told you I would," he said. "People say things," she said, quoting herself from the morning, knowing that he'd remember it. He looked at her across the kitchen. "I know," he said. "I'm not most people." And this time, when she looked back at him, she didn't look away first. They moved the next morning. Lily thought it was the greatest thing that had ever happened to her. She packed her backpack herself, which took 40 minutes because she changed her mind 6 times about which stuffed animals were essential and which ones could survive being left behind. And when she finally appeared in the kitchen doorway with her backpack on and her coat already zipped, she looked at her mother with the complete, luminous excitement of a child who had decided this was an adventure, and therefore it was. "Is Milo's house big?" she asked. "It's not his house," Nora said, folding a sweater with more precision than the task required. "It's a place he's letting us use for a little while." "But is it big?" "I don't know, Lily." "I hope it has stairs," Lily said seriously. "I've always wanted to live somewhere with stairs." Nora stopped folding. She stood there with a sweater in her hands and looked at her daughter. This small, entire person who had walked through the snow in mismatched boots and knocked on a stranger's door and upended both of their lives, and was now standing in their kitchen, hoping for stairs. And she felt something move through her that was too large and too complicated to name. So she just folded the sweater and put it in the bag and said, "Get your drawing book." The car arrived at 7:45. Not Marco this time. A woman, mid-40s, with the kind of composed, watchful stillness that Nora recognized as professional, who introduced herself simply as Carla, said good morning to Lily with genuine warmth, and loaded their bags into the trunk without being asked and without making it feel like a service, which it was. Lily got in the car and announced immediately, "I'm Lily. I'm 4.5. I like drawing and grilled cheese with garlic, and I'm very good at finding things." Carla looked in the rearview mirror. "Good at finding things. That's useful." "I know," Lily said with complete sincerity. Nora got in the car and said nothing, and the car moved, and she watched Crane Street disappear behind them with the particular feeling of a person leaving something they're not sure they'll come back to the same way. Milo was not at the Linden property when they arrived. He had sent a message that morning, early, before she'd expected to hear from him. "I have to deal with something. Carla will take you. I'll come tonight. You have everything you need." She had read it twice, and then put her phone in her pocket, and returned to folding clothes with the precision of someone managing their feelings through the organizational. The property on Linden was not what she'd prepared herself for. She had told herself on the drive over to be ready for something overwhelming, something that announced money and power in every corner, something that would make her feel small or managed or placed. She had been steeling herself against that feeling since last night because she needed to be clear-eyed and not impressed, because impressed was a door she wasn't ready to open. It was quiet and warm, and the kitchen smelled like someone had made coffee recently. There were books on the shelf that looked read, not decorative. The second bedroom, Lily's room, she understood immediately, had a small drawing table in the corner with a brand new set of markers on it, still in the packaging. She stood in the doorway of that room for a long moment. He had done that. He had thought about what her daughter needed in a room, and he had made sure it was there. And he had not said a word about it. Lily saw the drawing table and stopped breathing for approximately 1 second, and then said, "Mom," in the specific tone that meant she was having a feeling too large for any other word. "I see it," Nora said. "He got markers." "I see that. The good kind." Lily crossed the room and lifted the package with both hands, with the reverence of someone handling something precious. "Mom, the good kind with the tips that don't smush." "I know, baby. We need to tell him thank you." "We will." Lily set the markers down carefully, looked at the drawing table, looked at her mother, and then crossed back and hugged Nora around the middle without saying anything else. Just held on. And Nora put her hand on her daughter's head and stood there in the middle of a room that a man she'd known for 48 hours had prepared for her child. And she felt the wall she'd been carefully maintaining develop another crack and held completely still, as if stillness could prevent it from going further. It did not prevent it. Milo arrived at 6:17. She heard the door. She didn't come out of the kitchen immediately. She was finishing dinner, a thing she'd needed to do for her own sanity, because cooking was the one activity that turned the volume down on everything else, and she'd spent most of the afternoon at too high a volume. She heard him come in, heard the low sound of Carla's voice briefing him on the day, heard Lily's feet on the floor going from 0 to full speed in about 2 steps. "Milo, there are stairs, 2 sets, and the markers have the good tips." She heard him say something she couldn't make out, and then she heard Lily laughing, and she stood over the stove and breathed through her nose and told herself to stay level. She managed it until he came into the kitchen. He looked different from this morning, not different in a way she could have pointed at, same coat, same controlled stillness, but his jaw was tight in a way it hadn't been on Crane Street, and there was something behind his eyes that spoke to a day that had been something more than administrative. "You cooked," he said. "I needed something to do." She glanced at him. "You look like you need to sit down." "I'm fine." "You look like you've been saying that to people all day." He paused, then quietly, "Yeah, I have." "Sit down," she said. Not an offer, a statement. He sat down. She put a plate in front of him 15 minutes later, and he looked at it, and then looked at her, and she could see him recalibrating around the simple fact of being fed by someone who had done it because they'd noticed he needed it, and not because they were obligated to. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know. Eat." He ate. Lily appeared and ate approximately 4 bites of her own dinner, and spent the rest of the meal telling Milo about everything she'd discovered in the house, which included a closet that she'd decided was a perfect fort, a window that looked directly at a bird feeder that a neighbor apparently maintained, and a crack in the upstairs bathroom tile that she'd decided looked exactly like a sleeping cat. "It does look like a sleeping cat," Milo said seriously. "I know," Lily said. "I named her Biscuit." "Good name." "I thought so." Lily picked up a piece of carrot and examined it. "Are you going to stay tonight?" The question landed in the room like a stone into still water. Nora's hands stopped moving. Milo looked at Lily. "No," he said, "not tonight." "Why?" "Because your mom and I made some rules about how this works," he said, calmly and directly, the way he spoke to her, always level, never condescending, with the specific respect of someone who understood that children could tell when they were being handled. "And one of the rules is that I give you your space." Lily considered this. "That's a good rule," she decided, "but you could come back for breakfast." "Lily," Nora said, "I'm just saying he could." "It's noted," Milo said, and there was something in his voice, controlled but warm underneath in a way that he didn't always let through, that made Nora look at him sideways across the table. After dinner, after Lily was in bed, the process of which had taken 45 minutes because she wanted to tell Biscuit the tile cat goodnight and needed to stand in the bathroom doorway to do it properly. Nora came back to the kitchen and found Milo at the table with his phone face down and a cup of coffee he'd made himself. And she sat across from him, and they were back to the table again. The same positions, the same two people, with considerably more history between them than 48 hours should have been able to produce. "Tell me about today," she said. He looked at her. "You don't have to," she said, "but you've been carrying something since you walked in, and I think you've been carrying it all day, and I'd rather you didn't have to carry it in here." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I talked to Reese." Her spine went straight. "Directly?" "Through an intermediary first, then directly." He turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. He confirmed he knows about Crane Street. He tried to use it. "Tried," she said. "Past tense." "Past tense," he confirmed. "What does that mean?" "It means I made him understand that this particular approach wasn't going to produce the outcome he was looking for." His voice was level, measured. She had learned, in 2 days, to read the register underneath the levelness. And right now the register said that what had happened today had been serious and had required a version of him that he didn't bring into this kitchen. "Did anyone get hurt?" she asked. A pause. "No." "Is it over?" "For now." He met her eyes. "Rice doesn't give things up permanently. He recalibrates. He'll come back at a different angle. But he understands now that this particular angle has consequences." He paused. "He won't approach you directly. I've made that very clear." She sat with that. She was aware that there was a world of detail between what he was saying and what had actually happened today. And she was also aware that she was choosing, deliberately, not to ask for that detail. Because she understood, with the practical clarity she'd applied to most things in her life, that there were parts of his world that she could know about in shape and not in specifics, and that this was one of those parts. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me for this one," he said. "This one I owe you." She shook her head slightly. "You didn't." "I put you in the path of it," he said. The directness of it was flat and total and clearly not up for negotiation. "I know I didn't choose to, and I know that what I did was right, and I'd do it again. But the consequence was mine to solve. So don't thank me for solving it." She looked at him. "You're very hard on yourself," she said. He looked up from his coffee cup, like that had caught him. "Nobody's ever said that to you before," she observed. "Not in those words," he said. "What words do they usually use?" "Usually the words involve accountability, responsibility, taking ownership." He paused. "It never sounded like something that could also mean being hard on yourself. It always just sounded like doing what needed to be done." She thought about that. "Is there a difference?" "I used to think no," he said. "I'm rethinking that." She drank her tea. He drank his coffee. The house was quiet around them, a specific, real, lived-in quiet, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something settled. "Tell me something," she said. "Something that's not about any of this. Something about you." He looked at her, slightly surprised. "I've been thinking," she said, "that I know a lot about what you do and almost nothing about who you are. And those are different things. You knew that about me by the third time we talked. I want the same information." He considered that seriously. He didn't deflect or redirect, which she'd half expected. He thought about it genuinely, like someone searching through a long, closed room for something worth taking out. "I grew up in Bridgeport," he said. "South Side. My mother was sick. Different thing from yours, but sick. I was 8 when she went into the hospital the first time. I was 12 when she didn't come back out." He said it plainly, without the performance of having processed it. "There was nobody, an uncle for about 8 months, then nothing." She was very still. "I figured things out," he said, "the way you do when there's no one watching. Not always the right things." He turned his coffee cup. "By the time I was 19, I understood how this city worked. By 25, I was running part of it. He looked at her. It was never supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be a way out of something. And then it became the thing itself. He paused. I haven't thought about that in a long time. The difference between what it was supposed to be and what it became. What made you think about it now? She asked. You, he said simply. And Lily. Mostly Lily. Why Lily? Because she's 4 years old and her mother collapsed and she walked through the snow to find help. He looked at her steadily. And nobody failed her in the way that 4-year-olds can be failed. She knew what to do. She went and did it because you taught her that there was something worth walking toward. He paused. I didn't have anyone who taught me that. I just walked. I didn't know what toward looked like. She felt something open up in her chest that she'd kept shut for a long time. Not pity. She understood instinctively that he didn't want that and wouldn't receive it well. Something more equal than pity. Something like recognition. She's brave because she was terrified and she did it anyway, Nora said quietly. That's all brave is. I know, he said. I just forgot. The silence between them now was different from all the previous ones. The earlier silences had been full of assessment, calculation, the careful measuring of someone new. This one was different. This one had something in it that neither of them was going to name tonight, not because it wasn't real, but because it was too new and too important to name before it was ready, and they both knew that. She was the one who broke it, but gently. She's going to want you at breakfast, she said, just for your information. Is that a problem? She looked at him. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Ask me in a week. He almost smiled. Fair enough. He stood up to leave. He put his cup in the sink, which she noticed, and she noticed that she noticed it, and she noticed that she was now cataloging small domestic things about a man she'd met 2 days ago, and she filed that away for examination at a later date. At the door, he stopped. Nora, he said, and turned back. She was still at the table. What? He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him yet. Not the controlled steadiness, not the careful directness. Something undisguised. Something that had decided not to be managed for the duration of one sentence. I know this isn't what you planned, he said. Any of it. I know this isn't the version of your life you had figured out. And I know I showed up in it in a way that's complicated and probably inconvenient and definitely not simple. He held her gaze. But I need you to know that I meant what I said on Crane Street. About coming back. About not going anywhere. A pause. Not because you need me to stay, because I want to. She looked at him across the kitchen. She thought about Crane Street. She thought about the hospital and the chair and the food and the markers with the unsmushed tips and the way he'd sat with her daughter in a hallway and told her it was okay to be scared. She thought about a man who had built 12 years of cold empire and slept in a hospital chair because he'd said he would be there in the morning. She thought about her own wall, about how many years it had taken to build it and how it had been enough and how it had held everything out successfully right up until a large man in an expensive coat had crouched down to the level of a 4-year-old in the cold and said, "Take me to her." I know you meant it, she said quietly. He waited. That's what makes it complicated, she said. And then, before he could respond because she wasn't done, I'm not saying no. I want you to understand that. I'm saying I need to catch up to what this is, because it's moving very fast, and I have a 4-year-old who is already halfway in love with you, and I can't afford to be wrong about this. You're not wrong, he said, but you should be sure of that yourself. Not because I said so. She breathed. Give me time. You have time, he said. All of it you need. He opened the door. Cold air came in, Chicago January, the same cold that had been present since the beginning of all of this. Good night, Nora, he said. Good night. He stepped out. The door closed. She sat in the kitchen alone and listened to the house settle into quiet around her. Upstairs, Lily slept. Somewhere across the city, Milo drove back toward Harrington Court, and Nora knew, with the clear, practical, completely unromantic certainty she applied to things that were simply true, that her life had divided itself into before and after. And the dividing line was a night in January and a small girl in mismatched boots who had decided that the tall man with the dark coat was someone worth walking through the snow to find. She sat at the table for a long time after the sound of the car faded. Then she got up and washed both cups, because someone needed to. And when she was done, she stood in the quiet kitchen and allowed herself, just for a moment, just this once, to feel the full, terrifying, inconvenient weight of the fact that she didn't want him to have said goodnight, that she had wanted him to stay. She put that feeling away carefully, the way you put something away that you're not finished with yet. Upstairs from Lily's room came a sound, small, half asleep, barely there. "Biscuit," Lily murmured to the sleeping tile cat, somewhere in a dream. "It's okay, he's coming back." Nora stood at the bottom of the stairs and heard it. And despite everything, despite the fear and the complications and the wall that still had most of its bricks intact, she closed her eyes and thought, "Yeah, he is." He came back for breakfast. He hadn't planned to. He'd told himself, driving back to Harrington Court the night before, that giving them space was the right thing, that showing up 2 mornings in a row would blur a line he'd agreed to be careful about. He'd told himself that. He'd believed it for approximately 7 hours, and then it was 6:45 in the morning, and he was standing in the kitchen at Linden with a bag from the bakery on Mercer, because Decker had mentioned offhand years ago that it was the best in the city, and Milo had never had a reason to verify that, until now. Lily was already awake. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas with her drawing book open, working on something with the focused intensity of someone who had an artistic vision and was not going to be interrupted by minor details like breakfast or sunrise. She looked up when he came in and said, "I told Mom you'd be here," with the serene satisfaction of someone who has been right about something and is not surprised. "You told her before I knew," he said. "I know," she said. "You just took longer to figure it out." He set the bakery bag on the counter and looked at it, and thought that this 4-year-old was going to be an absolutely extraordinary person, and that someone needed to warn the world about her in advance. Nora appeared in the doorway in a gray sweater with her hair still loose, holding a mug, and looked at him, and then at the bag, and then at him again. "The bakery on Mercer," he said before she could speak. "I know which bakery it is," she said. "Good. You didn't have to. Lily said I could come for breakfast." "Lily is 4. 4.5, Lily said, without looking up from her drawing. "The half matters. I've said this." Nora looked at the ceiling briefly. Then she took another mug from the cabinet and poured coffee into it and set it on the counter near him without being asked. And he understood that as the specific thing it was, not an invitation to overstay, but an acknowledgement that he was here, and she had chosen not to make that a problem this morning. He took the coffee. She took the bakery bag. And for 20 minutes, the three of them sat at the kitchen table and ate. And Lily showed them the drawing she'd been working on, which was Biscuit the tile cat, apparently, though from the drawing, Biscuit appeared to have wings, which Lily explained was because Biscuit had decided she wanted them, and Lily saw no reason to argue with that. "Can cats just decide to have wings?" Milo asked. "In drawings they can," Lily said. "That's the whole point of drawings. You get to decide." He looked at Nora over the drawing. She was already looking at him. She looked away first this time, but it was close. It was the closest it had been. He left at 7:30 because he had to, and Lily asked him if he was coming for dinner, and before he could answer, Nora said, "We'll see," in the tone that contained a real answer that wasn't no, and that was the most he was going to get, and he understood that, and he took it. The day was long and operational, and full of the kind of decisions that required his full attention, which he gave, because his world did not make allowances for distraction. But underneath all of it, Running like a current beneath the surface of every meeting and every call was Linden Street, was a kitchen table, was a woman in a gray sweater who set down a coffee mug and looked away almost too slowly. He was 3 blocks from the Linden property at 5:15 when Decker called. "We have a problem," Decker said. Milo went still. "Reese?" "No." A pause that told him the answer was worse than Reese in a different way. "It's internal. Carver." Carver. Danny Carver, who ran the East Side operation, who had been with Milo for 6 years and had been growing quietly ambitious for 2 of them. The particular kind of ambition that didn't announce itself, that moved slowly and deliberately and made itself comfortable in the margins before it reached for the center. "What did he do?" Milo asked. "He talked to someone he shouldn't have talked to," Decker said, "about Crane Street, about the woman." The cold that moved through Milo then had nothing to do with January. "What exactly did he say?" "Enough," Decker said. "He told Rice's people that your involvement with her was personal, that you'd stayed at the hospital, that you'd moved them." A pause. "He told them where, Milo?" The silence lasted 2 full seconds. "He told them where," Milo repeated. "I found out 20 minutes ago. I've already moved 2 additional men to the property. Nothing's happened yet, but Rice knows the Linden address. Whatever you told him yesterday about consequences, this changes the calculation." Milo was already moving. "I'm 4 minutes out. I'll be there in 10. He hung up and said to Marco, "Now," in a voice that meant something different from his usual voice, and Marco heard the difference and drove accordingly. He was through the door in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Nora was in the kitchen. She turned when he came in and saw his face, and her mug stopped halfway to her mouth. "What happened?" she said. "Where's Lily?" "Upstairs, drawing. Milo, what?" "She's safe," he said. "Right now, this moment, she is completely safe. I need you to hear that first." She put the mug down. "Tell me." He told her. Fast, clean, everything that mattered. Carver, the address, Rice knowing, the additional men outside. He didn't soften it because she didn't want things softened, and she couldn't make good decisions on softened information. She listened with her hands flat on the counter and her face doing the concentrated still thing that he'd learned meant she was processing fast and hard and not letting herself react until she had the full picture. When he was done, she said, "Someone on your side gave us up." "Yes." "Someone you trusted." "Someone I employed," he said. The distinction mattered to him, and she heard that it did. "I trusted very few people. He wasn't one of them. I was complacent about what he had access to." "Is Lily in danger right now? Real, immediate danger?" "No, I have men on every exit. Rice is aggressive but not reckless. He won't move on a fortified position without preparation." "How long until he's prepared?" 24 hours, maybe less." She breathed once, slowly. "So what do we do?" "I move you again tonight," he said. "Somewhere he can't connect to me, somewhere clean." He held her gaze. "And then I deal with Rice. Not defensively this time, directly." She looked at him for a long moment. "What does directly mean?" "It means I end it," he said. "Permanently. No more recalibrating, no more different angles." He understands, finally, that the cost of continuing this exceeds anything he could gain from it. "Without violence," she said. "Not a question, a condition." "I don't need violence," he said. "I need information, which I have, and leverage, which I'm about to obtain. Rice has things to lose too, more than he's been acting like." She studied him. He let her study him. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" "Okay, I trust you to handle it." She straightened. "What do I tell Lily?" "Tell her it's another adventure," he said. "Tell her Biscuit will be fine." Something moved across her face. Not the almost smile this time, something fuller, something that didn't pull back as fast. "She told you about Biscuit." She named a crack in the bathroom tile after a cat, he said. I remember everything she tells me. Nora looked at him for a long moment. Something was shifting in her face. That wall, those careful bricks, and one of them was letting go. He could see it happening in real time, and he didn't reach for it, because it had to happen at its own pace, or it would just rebuild the moment he looked away. Go get her, he said gently. Pack the essentials. 20 minutes. She went. He called Decker, and then he called 2 other people. And by the time Lily came downstairs with her backpack on, essential stuffed animals reevaluated and redistributed, the situation had already begun to move in the direction he intended it to move. Lily looked at him and looked at the door and looked at her mother. Are we going somewhere else? One more adventure, Nora said. Is it because of the bad people? Lily asked. Both adults went still. Nora crouched down. What do you know about bad people, baby? Lily considered this with her customary seriousness. I heard you talking before. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was just being quiet. A pause. Is Milo going to fix it? Yes, Milo said from across the room. Lily looked at him. Are you going to be okay? He held her gaze. Yes. Promise? He crouched down, the same way he had on his own doorstep 5 days ago in a different life. Yeah, he said. I promise. She looked at him with those enormous dark eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing, and believed, still, with the terrifying accuracy of a child who had been proven right before, that he was exactly who he appeared to be. Okay, she said, and then she held out her drawing book. I made you something, for while we're not here. He took it. She'd drawn him again, the large figure with the black coat. But this time he wasn't holding hands with the other figures. This time he was standing in front of them, facing away, facing outward. And behind him, small and safe, were Nora and Lily, the medium figure and the small one. And in Lily's careful, almost legible handwriting across the bottom, he stands in front so the scared goes away. He looked at that drawing for a moment longer than he meant to. He looked up and found Nora watching him from across the room. She'd seen the drawing. She knew what was written on it. She wasn't saying anything. She was just watching him hold it. And her eyes were doing the thing they sometimes did, where they were saying something that her mouth hadn't decided to say yet. Take care of them, he said to Carla, who was standing at the door. Always, Carla said. He looked at Nora. She held his gaze. Come back, she said, quietly, directly. Without the hedge or the management she would have wrapped around it 3 days ago. Just, come back. I will, he said. He meant it in a way he had not meant anything in a very long time. He dealt with Carver first. Not with punishment. Punishment was for people you still needed to make an example of to others, and Carver wasn't worth the message. He dealt with him with a single conversation, in a room, that ended with Carver understanding 3 things with absolute clarity. What he had done, what it had cost, and that the most fortunate outcome available to him was the one currently on the table. He took it. People generally did, when the alternative was properly explained. Then he dealt with Rice. It took 4 hours. He had the information he needed, information that Rice had been confident nobody had, about accounts and arrangements and agreements with certain city officials that would not survive daylight. The kind of information that turned leverage into paralysis. He laid it out on the table, item by item, with the calm efficiency of a man who had been preparing for this conversation, on some level, for 3 years and had simply been waiting for sufficient cause to have it. Reese was silent for a long time after. The woman and the child are off the table, Milo said. Permanently. They don't exist in your world. They are not leverage. They are not angles. They are not variables. They are people who have nothing to do with anything between you and me. And if that ever changes, if I ever hear their names in a context that connects to you in any way, what's on this table becomes public, and everything you built goes with it. He paused. Are we clear? We're clear, Reese said. Low, tight, the voice of a man swallowing something that tasted like surrender. Good, Milo said. That's all I needed. He left. He drove to the address Carla had sent him, a property in Lincoln Park, clean and quiet. One of three he'd kept completely separate from his operational life for exactly this kind of contingency. He knocked. Nora opened the door. She looked at his face, the same way she always looked at his face, fast and accurate, reading the register underneath the surface. And whatever she found there made her exhale slowly, the long exhale of someone releasing something they'd been holding in their chest for several hours. "It's done?" she asked. "It's done." She stepped back and let him in. Lily was asleep on the sofa with a blanket over her and her drawing book clutched to her chest. He looked at her and felt the thing in his chest, that locked and unlocked thing from Crane Street, settle into something that didn't move around anymore, something that had found its position and intended to stay there. "She made me wait until 9 before she'd go to sleep," Nora said quietly. "She said she needed to know you were okay before she could sleep, and she was going to wait as long as it took." He looked at Lily sleeping. "She made you a drawing," Nora said, "while she waited. It's on the table." He went to the table. Lily had drawn him walking away, the large figure, the black coat, but this time there was a door at the edge of the drawing, and through the door were the three figures, all of them together, and the medium figure had her hand outstretched toward the door, toward him. And in Lily's handwriting, carefully, slowly, as if she'd taken great care, "Come home." He stood over that drawing for a long time. He heard Nora behind him, the soft sound of her moving across the room, coming to stand beside him. He didn't turn. They both looked at the drawing together. "She doesn't know what that word means to you," Nora said quietly. "She just meant, here, come back here, to where we are." "I know," he said, "but it landed anyway." "It landed anyway," he said. He turned and she was right there, closer than he'd realized. And she was looking at him with her eyes open all the way, the whole wall finally down, not collapsed in a rush, not broken, but deliberately opened, the way you open something you've decided you're ready to open. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I'm only going to say it once because I'm not good at saying it, and I'll probably mess up the wording. Tell me." "I was wrong about not knowing yet." She held his gaze. "I told you to ask me in a week. Whether it was a problem that Lily was attached to you, whether I—" She stopped, recalibrated, started again. "I already know. I've known since the hospital, since you slept in the chair." She pressed her lips together briefly. "I've been taking longer to say it than I needed to because I was scared. And I'm still scared. But I'm saying it anyway because Lily taught me tonight that being scared doesn't mean you wait. It means you do it scared." He looked at her. "I don't want you to leave," she said. "Not because we need you here, because I want you here. There's a difference, and I know you understand the difference." "I understand the difference," he said. "So," she exhaled, "there it is." He reached out and put his hand against the side of her face, just once, just briefly, a touch that said, "I heard you, and I'm not going anywhere, and this is real," all at the same time without any of it needing to be said aloud. She didn't move away. "I've been building the wrong things for a very long time," he said. "I didn't know that until a 4-year-old knocked on my door in the snow." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not going to be easy. My world is not simple, and it doesn't change overnight, and there are going to be things about it that require more patience than you should have to give." "I know," she said. "I'm also not going anywhere," he said. "Those two things are both true at the same time." "I know that too," she said. "That's why I'm still standing here." They stood in the quiet of the Lincoln Park kitchen, and outside the city moved and breathed and went about its cold January business. And inside, the thing that had started on a doorstep 5 days ago with 7 words from a frightened child settled into something solid and real and unmoving. Not finished, far from finished. Complicated, imperfect, requiring work and time and patience, and the specific courage of two people who had both been alone long enough to have forgotten what it felt like to choose otherwise. But real. On the sofa, Lily slept on, one arm around her drawing book, entirely at peace, as if she had known from the moment she'd stood on tiptoe and knocked with both small fists on a stranger's door, that this was exactly where they were all going to end up. Because she had known. She had walked through the snow and chosen the right door, the way children sometimes choose things with an accuracy that adults spend their whole lives trying to recover. And she had stood in the cold and looked up at the largest, most frightening man on the street and seen, with clear and uncomplicated eyes, not what he was, but who he was. And she had been right. Milo looked at her sleeping, and then at Nora beside him, and then at the drawing on the table with its outstretched hand and its two words that had split something open in his chest that he understood, now, was never going to close again. Come home. He was already there. For the first time and longer than he could account for. Longer than 12 years of empire. Longer than the cold discipline he'd built around himself like architecture. Longer than the night his mother didn't come back out of the hospital and left a 12-year-old boy to figure out what walking towards something was supposed to mean. Milo Keating was exactly where he was supposed to be, and he intended to stay.